I'm awfully glad you're here. You know, every time I welcome my neighbors into this house, I think to myself, how fortunate are we to live in the community where we do and have such interesting people around us. And today, I'd like for you to meet Jenny Frederick. And Jenny is a fiber artist and a paper maker. And she uses a lot of stuff to do all this. And did you start out doing this as an artist, or have you changed what you do?
I had a very traditional upbringing, lots of life drawing and painting and sculpture, and I was introduced to paper making at the Art Institute.
So you didn't do it before that?
Mm-mm.
So you were teaching at that point, yes? Or were a student?
No, I was a student then. I transferred there to work specifically with Joan Livingston, who was a felt maker, and she introduced me to paper making in 1976. That'll age
with
me
the centennial, you came into your own.
And
yes.
I discovered I was in the middle of a renaissance. That was about the time in the late 70s when a lot of traditional crafts were being revived. Fine woodworking, fine book making, and paper making was one of them.
But you know, we are all influenced by the people around us. And you are particularly proud of the influence that you had from your uncle.
Yes.
And he was, those of us who have taken the paper for many years remember S.J. Ray. And he was the cartoonist for the Star. I particularly like this one because spring training in the baseball season, and particularly when he was drawing, was a big kaboom in the United States. So he, how many years? He drew for a long time at the Star.
He actually worked for them for 44 years. He was a commercial artist, and then he, at one point, he was at the New York Students League as a student.
You know, a lot of artists came from the New York Students League.
And then he ended up being the cartoonist, and he retired, I believe, about 63 and passed away in the early 70s. But he had to do one cartoon a day, and I have about 175 in my collection.
And then you have, well, this one, speaking of that, this one is kind of interesting because he probably was running out of ideas because he's looking at the whole world and he says, I wonder what they're doing in Alaska.
And that's a self-portrait. I just love that. He's looking at the globe and scratching his head.
So I would think that when you have to come up with something every day, it's a little bit difficult. But he was a great influence on your life.
He was a great influence. We were about the only family that they saw, and they had historic property up north that was part of it's a walnut split log cabin that was homesteaded in 1836.
Well, now part of your home now is a log cabin, isn't it?
Well, that's where I live.
Oh, that's where you live.
My family inherited the property when they passed away. And so we visited them. It was all country when I was a child, and it seemed like it took forever to get up there. It's off north of Berry Road.
It was a forever place because there was nothing going on up there.
There was nothing, and they lived very simply. They were Christian Scientists. He had an old black Cadillac. He thought he had to have a good car to drive into the Star every day.
Right.
And so we visited, and he showed me how to make ink out of walnuts and did watercolor for me. And so I just have great memories of him.
But see, isn't it interesting that, and I'm sure that if you said that to him, if he come back, he would be surprised that you said that.
I don't know.
You think he would know that?
I hope he knows that I followed in his footsteps. You know, I think one of the ways he was a big influence was that he was an artist who made a living doing what he loved. And I think that was really important.
But isn't it interesting the way people influence our lives? Sometimes very peripherally, just like the dye at the walnuts. I mean, he didn't think anything was such a big deal out of that. He thought that was a fun thing for a little girl to do. And but people do influence our lives just as he influenced yours. But other influences have come in your life through your travels.
Yes.
And one of those is San Pablito. And what did you learn from these wonderful people?
So these are the Otomi in San Pablito, Mexico, and Puebla State. And
now Puebla State is where? In the middle?
It's
in the
north of Mexico City.
Okay.
And these are some of the last of the paper makers. Their tradition, it's called amate paper. and it's clotely related to what the Aztecs did. There are two groups of paper makers in Mexico left today, and it's the Otomi making amate, and then I also documented the Lacandon Maya in Chiapas making hu'un, which is a Mayan tradition. So you have this,
But the
which
Maya
is,
influenced both of those groups.
this one's very close to Aztec, and then the hu'un's very close to the Maya.
Now, are these people both Otomi?
They're a couple, and they look like they've been making paper together for 100 years.
Well,
and
they
the
certainly
whole
do.
village made paper. He's using a lava stone beater to beat the fiber. So they use a mulberry. It's the same fiber that's actually used in Japan. And normally they lay it out at a right angle and then fill it in. But they were making this paper, a lace
Well, the
amate.
paper that you see in the background, you have a sample of. And this is Otomi paper. What do they, after they get through with this stuff, what do they do with it?
This is decorative.
This is decorative.
They sell all over the world. They make paper for painters in a particular state in Mexico.
With the holes filled in.
But then with the holes filled in. And then this I had never seen before. My work was very linear and had to do with multiples. And I was really drawn to this, and was actually able to write an article and commission them to make enough paper to tip into the magazine article.
See, I think, and you talk about, well, let's look at the tools first. I just think this is so interesting. I mean, these people have passed their whole lives making this.
And the whole village makes it. It's just amazing. So we had to hire a driver, and when we got out, I heard the
Tap, tap,
beating,
tap.
and
Isn't that interesting?
all of my hair just stood straight up because I'd been trying to get there for probably 20 years, and I was actually there.
Now let's look at the things that you use. You informed me that this stuff was wet. What is this? And it is wet.
It starts dry.
Starts dry.
And
okay, here it
I
is.
have bales of it. And a lot
So
of
you're the
it,
person
and
to see if you want
if
bales.
you want kozo or mulberry fiber,
Yes.
come to me. The name in Japanese is kozo.
And this is, it's very fibrous, and you can see that. It doesn't grow with a gold ribbon around it, but it's certainly. But I said to Jeannie, I said, you know, we got lots of mulberry trees around here, but she said it's not, it has to be a particular kind. And this is a bushy mulberry.
And this is the inner bark. There's a black bark, the outer bark a green bark, and then the inner white bark. And it has to be cooked in an alkali to remove lignin and the acidic properties.
Okay, and then after, is
rinsed.
this cooked?
That's cooked in
Okay.
soda ash, and the Otomi use wood ash. And then, I mean, when
Here it
you
is.
first look at that fiber, you think, how on earth can you break that down? But
Ta-da!
it breaks down
Got it.
very
I
readily.
got the answer.
And so that's a lava stone beater that I actually use in
And
my
so
own work.
you beat this stuff.
And I was able to purchase that from the Otomi.
And this is old, yes?
I think that's a pretty old one. I have some pre-Columbian
Do you?
beating stones also.
So they've
that
been
I
doing this a
collect.
long time. Well, what did the Maya do with this? What did they originally do with this? It hasn't always been decorative because they haven't always had tourists coming there.
Well, the Maya used it for their codices, for their
So they used it
books.
as writing paper.
And clothing, and in sacrifice, they bloodlet onto paper and then burned it to ask for rain and to ask for help with their crops and their
So
families.
as you beat this stuff, how long does it take you to beat this into shape? I mean, that doesn't even sound good.
I also teach Japanese paper making, so
Uh-huh.
I teach Mexican paper making, and then
So the
also,
Japanese paper making
Japanese.
is different?
Japanese is very different. It's very thin. That's what they use for their shoji screens.
And now
it's
this paper
beaten
is
into
not
a
particularly
pulp.
thin, nor is it
No.
supple.
No, so to make Japanese paper, you beat that.
You still use the mulberry stuff.
still use that and
Okay.
beat it, and it beats right into a pulp in 30 minutes. So I can't tell you how many years I've had students.
So you
in
have
my
big
studio
muscles in your
beating.
right arm. So this is a job. And when you cook this, it is wet. So when you prepare this, do you do it a lot at a time in a big kettle, or?
I do about 2 pounds at a time. It's a lot
that's
of
a lot,
work,
'cause it doesn't weigh a
cooking
lot.
And then rinsing, and then
And you boil it and rinse and boil and rinse.
and then for this technique, you can very easily pull it apart to the thickness you want, and then I
So you
actually
do pull it apart.
draw with it.
You draw it.
That's how my work is made.
Okay.
And this is how they work also, but with bigger pieces, and just lay it out and then beat it.
Okay, and then ultimately, you'll have to, there we go. Ultimately, we get to this.
This is the right side up.
Oops, sorry about
That's
that.
okay.
Ultimately, we get to this, which I think is just lovely. But this is not particularly thin, and it's only supple because it's there are a lot of openings in it. And I know that let's talk about repetition and the circular, because if we notice in the Otomi creation here, there are lots of circles. Talk about circles.
Actually, the circle comes from my research on the Lacandon Maya and Chiapas. They used the circle. If you look at old Mayan art in stone carvings, you can see braziers with bark cloth strips, and they have a circular motif on them, and that represents blood. And
The circle represents blood?
but it also represents corn, it represents rain, it represents the jaguar spots and their hero twins. So it's very symbolic of continuation of life, the ball game. It's all interrelated. And so I was very influenced by that research. And
Well, but don't you think the
so I
circle
work with
appears
circles.
in other than Mayan?
Oh, yes,
You know,
yes.
because I know in the Buddhist temples, you know, they walk in a circle around the temple, and the prayer wheels go in a circle, and the chakras are a circle in India, and that's time. Time passes. They don't tell time, but it represents time. I think this
Absolutely.
is terrific. I love this.
And so that's an unfinished, that's just a sample.
I know, but I like that.
And I've produced very large pieces, up to 4 by 8 feet, and 3-dimensional pieces also.
But they're
with
lightweight
this
to lift.
technique.
That's a
They
good
are,
thing.
They are.
But isn't this? I mean, now this is these little plastic things that you put around.
Cable ties.
Yeah. See, and the circles again, and this is painted with something.
So I was introduced to encaustic using wax. Encaustic is wax, damar, resin, and pigment by an artist whose work I saw in Santa Fe, Paula Rowland. And I took 4 workshops with her. I was just knocked out by her work that I saw at William Siegel Gallery in Santa Fe. And we became good friends. And so
Does she do something similar
I took
to
4
that?
workshops. She paints, and she's invented monotypes with encaustic. This is an encaustic monotype.
This is. Oh,
This is with
okay.
using
Oh, I see.
the fiber as a resist.
Okay.
And
There we go.
also as a relief element. And I've collaborated with her. She's invited me to co-teach with her in Provincetown and Cape Cod
I
the
got it.
past
Here
2
we are.
summers.
See, and this has an overlay of your paper.
Kozo.
Down
Yeah,
here.
the mulberry.
And this is encaustic up here.
Yes.
And why do you like black and white?
I've been, I knew you'd ask that question. I've been working on a black and white series for probably the past 2 years. So I'm getting ready to start a black, white, and red series actually. But I think I just wanted minimal color so I could focus on the form and the imagery.
Well,
this
and you've even
particular
gone so
series.
far as to write a book called
Black
Black
and
and White. And I think if you have any interest in the paperwork and this kind of construction, that the book might be of great interest. And I'm looking for one of the pages where I thought you might like to see because it's most interesting. Let's see, at page 40, I think I'm looking for. Hang on, be patient here. There it is.
And that's a very large piece with the same technique. It's about 56 inches long. And
56 inches long?
There's a
That's
detail on the
wonderful.
right.
So, okay, so you have made, and it looks like very much like this small piece that I just showed. Where does this go? I know you sell your work, so does this go in a home? This is a big number. So does it go in your home? Does it go in a gallery? Who do you sell to?
I sell to private collectors mostly. I'm really excited about an exhibit coming up. I am in, it's called Materialities Contemporary Textile Art at Aeromont in Tennessee, and it was a juried show of Surface Design Association members, and they're doing a beautiful exhibit and catalog, and that's coming up in first part of October. And so I have a big piece that'll be in that show.
I want to pull a thread out of your, and that word is surface design. Is there any transfer between the art for art's sake and something utilitarian in the way of a surface design for upholstery or I don't know, material or something like that? Do you ever, is there any crossover in the design part of it?
With this work, to be utilitarian?
Yeah.
I have actually produced some utilitarian things.
Like what?
Placemats.
Okay, well.
Runners. But I also thought that would be, could you hand this piece to me?
This one?
Yeah, really interesting as
Got it?
clothing.
Oh, I never thought of it. That's as if you don't want to bend your arm. Yeah. But
You see a lot of 3D clothing being produced now.
Well, yes,
So
they make clothing out of duct tape and every other darn thing. But I have to say that, well, let me ask you this: is there any way to get this so it would bend a little bit better?
It's really stiff. It's
It
just
is
the
stiff.
nature of the
It is
fiber,
stiff.
and that's particularly stiff because it has the encaustic wax on it also.
See, but that is the beauty of an artist, because I always think artists have a third eye, and they see things that other people don't. I mean, it wouldn't occur to me to wear this, but it would occur to me to, to use that design. I'm more utilitarian, you see, and they do. They make clothing out of everything. I noticed, what was I looking at in the, they have the fashion shows, and they made it out of something that I thought, boy, that's really stretching it a little bit.
It would be fun for a fashion show.
Absolutely
Definitely.
it would.
Absolutely.
Absolutely it would. But this would also be very fun to, this would be a lovely, you can go this way too, and it'd be a lovely table decoration or something like that. Now, does it occur to you now to add color? No.
I have done really colorful pieces. I did a piece that was called, several pieces. One in particular was called Fiesta, and it was bright reds and yellows, and it was influenced by, my work is largely influenced by my travels, and in that particular case, I was influenced by a festival I saw in Peru where they rebuilt one of the last remaining Inca straw suspension bridge, and then they had a big dance festival, and people wore costumes from recycled materials. So those pieces actually had whistles and candy wrappers and all kinds of recycled materials attached. So I do different series. And
most artists that are really talented change around just a little bit. They don't forever do the same thing. But I know that you name your pieces. How do you come up with the names? Does this one have a name?
This is Chacol's series. This shape was influenced by the Lacandon Maya, and it's.
And they lived in what part of Mexico?
They live in Chiapas. They're still there, and they make bark cloth called hu'un. But that is the shape of a ceremonial board that they still use. There's just a few elders left that are still practicing their religion.
And what is the meaning of that board? Do you know?
I think it represents the human body a little bit.
It does look like it, doesn't it?
But they actually put incense on, and they say, this is your heart, this is your foot. And it still goes back to bloodletting. Even though they don't practice bloodletting today, they still use symbolism that represents that.
I think that's interesting. The bloodletting was not for health. It was for prayer.
It was for health, but also to ask for rain.
Uh-huh. See, I just think that's so interesting. Now, do they use color, or are they in the black and white?
They used red.
They use red.
They used red.
Because of blood. Yeah. But the incense, what do they make the incense out of?
Palm. It's called palm incense. It's a particular kind of tree sap that they
Is
use,
it
and then they burn it.
Is it a sweet smell or a sweet smell?
Yeah, it's very nice.
That's interesting.
I was actually able to document a ritual in Chiapas in what they call a God house, and I was able to videotape the whole thing, and also I was able to document them in film, us hiking into the Lacandon rainforest, and one of the Lacandon elders cutting down the tree with a machete and stripping it of bark and actually making bark cloth.
And this is really, I mean, this must be a very interesting effort for you, because this is the continuation of your art, where it starts and it keeps moving down the road until you've gotten to where you are.
And the continuation, for me, it's been research that's been really meaningful. It's fed my soul, but it's also giving back to them, because I'm able to publish articles and collect actual paper specimens for the articles. And I've been able to collect for the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking in Atlanta also. So for me, it's a way of hoping those traditions will continue.
And see, that's very, do they know what you're doing?
I think so, hopefully.
Have you been back recently, or do you?
I haven't been back. I'm going to Mexico for Day of the Dead in the end of October, 1st of November, and then I've become very good friends with a group of Mayan weavers in Guatemala. They're Kekchikal, and I'm visiting them for Christmas and New Year's.
Well, that's a good segue, because I know that you're interested in textiles.
I collect textiles. Yeah. I have textiles mostly from my Latin American travels. I've traveled extensively in Mexico and Guatemala, and Peru and Ecuador.
Now, do these textiles influence your art, or is it a separate?
They do. There's particular textiles that have influenced this work, and those are the sort of lace textiles that the Chancay culture did in Peru.
But not made of lace.
No, actually woven. Those are woven, very beautiful, and I was able to see a collection of those in Peru. Any open weave netting is produced in Chiapas, and from pita fiber. So all of those definitely.
So what I'm extrapolating from this is that these paper makers, artists, are concentrated in particular areas. Is that where the Maya were powerful? Why are they there in Chiapas?
They were. Oh, yes, definitely. Yaxchilan is near them. Yaxchilan is a very important site for the Lacandon.
And are they offshoots of the Maya?
Yes.
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 They're all basically Mayas.
Yes. Yucatec. They speak Yucatec Mayan, actually. And I was actually nominated for a grant to do that particular work, research, and I worked with an anthropologist who's worked with them probably 35 years, and he translated for me because he speaks their language. So that was really great.
It is. You know, and reading the materials about you, you're very interested in symbols, but also in balance. Talk about that a little bit. I mean, these are not, exactly balanced, but balance in what? Balance of nature, balance what?
I think, and just balance in life. This work for me is very meditative. The repetition, that process was kind of instilled in me at the Art Institute with Joan Livingston, because she introduced an assignment that had to do with multiple element construction. And so I've been working that way with repetition a long time. Just balance in life. You know, I think that's what we all look for. And
Well, don't you
this is
know?
very meditative.
You know, it's so interesting because the world and the history of the world is more alike than it is different. And when we talk about balance in life, and I think about the ancient Egyptians when they crossed the river Styx, their heart was weighed against a feather, and the balance of those two needed to be there so that they could pass into the land of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
So balance comes in often, and it isn't necessarily one bush on this side and one bush on this side and two bushes in the middle. It's a balance of life and living that is important, I think. You know, there are all kinds of places where that kind of a thought pops up, I think. And the circles, as I said, you see them all over.
Mm-hmm.
But symbols, what else do you use besides a circle that you're interested in that's symbols?
That's pretty much it. You know, as I said, my work is very much influenced by my travels, also by my research.
Even your earrings are circles.
I know. These are from the Kemper also. I pick jewelry that works with my aesthetic, obviously. I did work not too long ago that had to do with what's happening to the whales and sea creatures ingesting plastic. And that's in part where the cable ties came from, was wanting to do work that looked beautiful but yet sort of foreboding at the same time. And I actually did a piece that was in a invitational show on the East Coast called Beached, and it was this technique, but it was stuffed with stuff, and then had the cable ties.
Well, you know, it is so interesting because I always think that artists communicate the world around them in different ways, and I think that through the eye of the artist, things are seen differently, and the communication of balance, of life being a circle, of repetition, all of those things come through the artist's work and yours in different ways. And so it makes our life more interesting to see how artists of different stripes interpret the balance of the world around them. So as I say, thank you so much to Jenny Frederick for coming and for bringing your beautiful things. They make us think, Jenny, and they remind us that the world is greater than just ourselves. And I hope that you've enjoyed talking to Jenny as much as I have. So thank you, Jenny Frederick, and thank you for being with us. It's our community.
Thank you, Mary. It's been a pleasure.
It's been.